Good evening. Thanks for joining us on India Business Hour. I'm Shireen Bhan. Straight to the day's market action where the bulls began the trading week in top gear. The market closing the day at its highest level in 2019 with the Nifty soaring past 11,100. The Sensex breached the 37,000 mark, gaining about 400 points. A strong start there for our markets, but a stock that continues to remain in focus this Monday evening. Naresh Goyal has pressed the panic button. The Jet Airways chairman has shot off a letter to Etihad last week, highlighting that the carrier was in a precarious position and warned that the airline could be grounded if it did not receive a funding of 750 crore rupees immediately. The details of the letter are out on a day when the Etihad board is meeting to discuss the fund infusion plans for the beleaguered airline. Anu Sharma and Ritu Singh both with us now. Anu, to you first. Naresh Goyal making it clear to the Etihad board that urgent funding is need of the hour. In fact, he wants the money this week or the airline could in fact be grounded.
That's right. Well, Naresh Goyal has sent a distress call to the group CEO of Etihad in a letter dated March 8th. Goyal has told Etihad that the airline is in a precarious situation and needs interim funding support of 750 crore rupees as early as this week, and non-receipt of this will lead to severe consequences leading to its grounding. He has also termed it as a much-needed funding, as only after the infusion of these funds will the airline be able to get a matching contribution from the banks as per the resolution plan that was decided a few days ago. Goyal further added that this interim funding is urgent as over 50 planes of the airline are on ground and payments to vendors and employee salaries are pending. Now, it is important to note here that this is in contrast to the exchange filings of the airline, according to which only 28 planes are on ground. Also, over 50 planes on ground roughly translates into 250 to 300 cancellations on a daily basis. With regard to the monetization plan of Jet Airways loyalty program, Jet Privilege, Goyal has also told Etihad that all approvals from the Aviation Ministry have also been secured. Clearly, today's board meeting of Etihad will set the tone for the airline survival path as per this letter. Back to you.
All right, Anu, many thanks for joining us with that. But let me go across to Ritu now. Ritu, the Etihad board is meeting to discuss the jet revival plan. Now, it required and it asked for several conditions, caveats as part of this fund infusion plan. The regulator has steadfastly said no. So what are the expectations from this meeting?
Well, Shireen, the most critical bit is Etihad first bringing in funds for Jet Airways, because without Goyal and without Etihad Airways pledging at least some money which they will infuse into the airline, the lenders are very unwilling to commit any further loans as far as, the revival plan of Jet Airways is concerned. It hinges on both of these promoters first bringing in funds, and therefore today's board meeting holds a lot of significance, because this is when Etihad is expected to decide on the quantum of infusion that it is willing to undertake for the revival of Jet Airways. Now, the bank-led resolution plan had identified a funding gap of 8,500 crore rupees, which, the bankers followed up with a rights issue, which they've proposed, but the size of that was still debatable. Now, we're given to understand that Etihad wants to participate only to the extent that its stake remains below 25% at about 24.5%, because once it crosses that limit, it'll have to, by SEBI regulations, it'll have to go for an open offer, something that Etihad wants to avoid at all costs. We're also given to understand that, once the debt conversion takes place, the banker share, which would have risen to 51%, they want that, after the rights issue and the restructuring is completed, for that to fall to 32%. NIIF is also likely to participate along, backed by RDR, and there we're given to understand that NIIF will hold about 19.5%, and Naresh Goyal's stake will fall to about 20% without any board seats. Now, this is what, is currently under discussion. Etihad's board meeting outcome is critical to see to what extent Etihad agrees to participate. Several conditions and various discussions have been held with lenders, and no conclusion really reached so far. But Etihad, in its statement to CNBC-TV18 a short while ago, has said that as a minority shareholder, it continues to work constructively with the Jet Airways board, management and other stakeholders.
All right, Ritu and Anu, thanks very much. This is going to be a story that we continue to track very closely. Naresh Goyal making it clear, telling Etihad, the partner for Jet Airways, you need to bring in the money, you need to bring it now. Remember, 50 planes already grounded as part of the jet fleet. And to quote Naresh Goyal in that letter, the situation is deleterious. Now, last evening, a Nairobi-bound Ethiopian Airlines jet crashed shortly after takeoff from Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. The airline confirming that all 157 people on board, 149 passengers and 8 crew members were killed. Passengers from over 30 nationalities were on board. India's External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj also confirmed that 4 Indians died in the crash. Now, the aircraft, a Boeing 737 MAX 8, lost contact with air traffic control soon after takeoff. The Ethiopian Airlines CEO in a press conference said the pilot had reported technical difficulties and had been given clearance to return to the Ethiopian capital. The cause of the crash has not been determined yet. The investigation is still underway. And this is not the first time that the safety of the 737 MAX 8 has been questioned in recent months. The Ethiopian airline tragedy is the second involving this model in the past 5 months. In October, a Lion airplane crashed into the sea off Jakarta, killing all 189 people on board. Let's go across to CNBC's Phil Lebu. He joins us now from Chicago. Phil, we've seen the Dow being under pressure on account of the fall in the Boeing stock. Is the company saying anything at all on what has transpired with these 2 crashes?
Well, the company is saying that it is working with investigators, that it still believes in the safety, the airworthiness of the 737 MAX airplane, and that it believes that this is a safe airplane to operate. So having said that, you've also got a number of airlines and or governments, whether it's Indonesia, China, you've got Cayman Airways, you've got Ethiopian Airlines, who have all said, we're going to ground the 737 MAX 8 until we know a little bit more about what happened both with the Ethiopia crash as well as the crash in October in Indonesia. So you've got pressure building on investigators as well as on Boeing to come up with some answers in terms of the safety of the 737 MAX planes.
Right, Phil, you just pointed out that some regulators and airlines have taken the preemptive action of grounding the 737 MAX 8. But what about the FAA, about the NTSB? What are American airlines doing at this point in time in India? Because the regulator has reviewed safety concerns regarding the 737 MAX planes, has ruled out grounding at this stage. Additional compliance measures have been advised. What's the situation as far as the U.S. regulator is concerned?
Well, any decision would likely be made as a result of the NTSB and the FAA saying, you know what, we think there are some questions here that need to be addressed, and therefore the plane needs to be grounded. We're not at that point yet. We should also point out that I've talked with a number of airlines, particularly here in North America, who fly the 737 MAX 8, and they've not had any problems at all. In fact, they consider it a plane that is operating as it should be operating. So you've got conflicting forces here. You've got those who fly this plane who, in many cases, are saying, it's working great. This is exactly what's supposed to be happening. And you've also got these 2 crashes, which are raising these questions. So though that's what the FAA will have to weigh in terms of making a decision about whether or not to ground this plane. And by the way, if the FAA does say ground the plane, that pretty much is going to end up being a worldwide order, so to speak, because so many aviation agencies around the world follow the lead of the FAA.
All right, Phil Lebu, thanks very much for joining us. Security and safety concerns being raised with the Boeing 737 MAX 8. Preemptive move so far on the part of some regulators and airlines that have decided to ground it. In India, the DGCA ordering additional compliance measures, but no grounding just yet. There's about 12 SpiceJet aircraft of that model and 5 that Jet operates currently. Now, here's the latest in the race for Essar Steel. The Ruiyas, who are the promoters of the company, have moved the appellate tribunal against the NCLT order for ArcelorMittal's resolution bid. This was expected. Now, challenging the NCLT decision, the Ruiyas have argued repeatedly that their bid of 54,000 crore rupees was the best fit for Essar Steel's lenders. They have also said that the lenders must look at maximization of returns. It's not just the Ruiyas. Essar Steel's dissenting creditor Standard Chartered has also moved the appellate tribunal against the NCLT order. The British bank has argued that Arcelor's 42,000 crore rupee bid is discriminatory against Standard Chartered. The NCLAT has said that it will hear the matter after the NCLT order is available. As I pointed out, this is along expected lines. But more from the NCLAT. The Appellate Tribunal has asked State Bank of India why Reliance Communications' IT refund of 260 crore rupees should not be used to repay Ericsson. This after the Anil Ambani-led company moved the Appellate Tribunal, urging it to direct lenders led by SBI to release the amount in favour of Ericsson India. Remember, on the 20th of February, the Supreme Court had said that if Reliance Communications failed to pay 550 crore rupees to Ericsson within 4 weeks, Anil Ambani will have to serve a 3-month prison term. Ashmit, who's been tracking that story, joins us now. Ashmit, given where things are, what can we expect from here on?
Well, indeed, the clock is ticking. The time is running out for Anil Ambani, for Arcom to pay that amount of 550 crore rupees. Keep in mind that on February 20th is when the Apex Court had directed Arcom to action that payment of 560 odd crore rupees to Ericsson. And the deadline for that is March 19th. If that payment does not go through to Ericsson, Anil Ambani could very well easily land up in jail. Now, of that entire payment so far of around 560 odd crore rupees, the only payment that has gone through to Ericsson is the 118 crore rupees that was already lying with the Apex Court. Now the question falls as far as to what happens as far as the balance payment is concerned. Now, both Anil Ambani and Arcom are relying heavily on income tax refunds of 260 crore rupees that was received and is sitting in the SBI account of Arcom. The concern that Arcom has expressed is that this payment should be allowed to in fact be sent over to Ericsson to satisfy the Supreme Court orders. The SBI on its part, however, is opposing this plea, arguing that this money is due and payable to the lender itself, that a total due of running into very many thousand crores is in fact payable to the lenders, and that money cannot be taken away from a secured creditor like an SBI and given to operational creditors like Ericsson. Having said that, the NCLAT came down quite hard on the lenders themselves, urging them to go ahead and to allow Arcom to make that use of that 260 crore rupees. In fact, the NCLAT observed that a false impression had been cast on them by giving ideas and illusions as to how 37,000 crore rupees could be raised by sale of Jio, that Jio deal has not fructified, and that the lenders have failed. So some tongue lashing there, but keep in mind that tomorrow will be a key day. The NCLAT will resume arguments in this case and will give clarity on whether or not Arcom can go ahead and make use of that 260 crore rupees to repay Ericsson. Back to you.
All right, Ashmit, many thanks for joining us with that. Now, the Reserve Bank of India's board members raised several objections to the demonetization proposal, according to the minutes of the 8th November board meeting that was held in 2016. Now, the board members argued that most of the black money would be held in assets like real estate and gold and not in cash. They also argued, according to a copy of the minutes that has now been made available to RTI applicant Venkatesh Nayak, RBI revealed the minutes after the CIC threatened to issue a show-cause notice to the Reserve Bank under the RTI Act. Incidentally, Governor Urjit Patel signed the minutes only on December 15th, 2016, so after the demonetization exercise had already been announced and was in fact underway. So this is now the big revelation through an RTI. But remember, already the Reserve Bank has made this amply clear, the fact that there were concerns raised about whether this would be a move that would deal with black money effectively or not. Those concerns had been raised by the Reserve Bank, which has now been made amply clear by way of this RTI.
उधर नरेंद्र मोदी भाषण में कहते रहते हैं मेक इन इंडिया, मेक इन इंडिया, मेक इन इंडिया। अगर आप उनकी शर्ट के पीछे देखोगे मेड इन चाइना लिखा हुआ है।
अब आप सोचिए, वो पुराने थके हुए लोगों से देश चलता तो कहां गया होता जी।
Elections 2019 are here. The announcement of the complex 7-phase timetable means that there are just 30 days left. 30 days left before the first votes are cast in the biggest democratic exercise in the world. Some interesting facts about the 42-day mega exercise is that voting this time will be held in 7 phases as compared to 9 phases. That was the story in 2014. There's also a marked increase in the voter base. The Election Commission says that 1.5 crore first first-time voters are expected to join the fray. So the millennial vote is going to be crucial. The overall increase is 8.5 crores. Now, there have been questions raised on how this timetable has been drawn up by the Election Commission. If you take a look at states like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar and West Bengal, they will be voting in all 7 phases, and this has been a concern that's been raised. Odisha will vote in 4 phases instead of 2. That was the case in 2014. Kashmir will see polling for the Lok Sabha, but unlike Andhra and Orissa, it will not vote for its state assembly. This is something that political parties are raising as a cause for concern as well. There's also a marked increase in the VVPAT machines. While in 2014, 20,000 such machines were used. This time, 17.4 lakh VVPAT machines will be in play. In other words, all polling stations will have a VVPAT machine. Now, there are also some introductions to make this process smoother. For example, candidates' faces will be displayed on EVMs and voters will be able to file complaints using an Android app. Also, having a voter slip will not be proof enough to cast your vote. Having a voter card has now been made mandatory. While the mechanics of pulling off this massive exercise are being put into gear by the Election Commission, political parties are busy stitching up alliances, identifying winning candidates and spinning together the narratives that will drive voters to cast their votes. The BJP will rely on the Prime Minister to deliver the goods, while the opposition will hope to make this an issue-based election. We have a strong expert panel to decode the elections. Former Election Commissioner T.S. Krishnamurthy, Sanjay Jha of the Congress Party, Gopal Krishna Agarwal of the BJP, A. Sarvanan of the DMK, political analyst Sandeep Shastri, Alok Prasanna Kumar of Vidhi Centre for Legal Policy. Now, Mr. Krishnamurthy, appreciate you joining us. Sir, my first question to you on what you make of this 7-phase electoral process that's been announced by the Election Commission. Questions being raised specifically on the 7 phases announced for states like UP, Bihar and West Bengal specifically.
Well, as far as the schedule is concerned, you have got to realize that it is a prerogative of the Election Commission in order to ensure free and fair elections. If they have announced 7-phase elections, as against 9-phase elections of 2014, you must say that there is an application of mind by the Election Commission. And Election Commission being a constitutional authority with 3 members, you cannot be questioning everything, that the schedule is wrong, that the schedule is not correct and so on. I think you should leave it to the wisdom of the Election Commission. I think the political parties should be mature enough to learn the Election Commission being a constitutional authority is not going to be led by X or Y. They have consulted the various states and they have reduced it from 9 to 7. Ideally, I would say it would be good if we can conduct elections in 3 or 4 phases. But unfortunately, our country being what it is, with so much of problems, so much of variety of issues involved, they have no choice but to go for this. But I should say that in future, the Election Commission, with necessary additional paramilitary forces, should try to achieve the election or conduct the election within a 5-phase, except perhaps a state like Jammu and Kashmir or UP. But 5-phase is ideal, and when I was the Chief Election Commissioner, we did the election in 5 phases. So I agree there are problems have changed, the voters' numbers have increased, the polling stations have increased, the management of men and material is not easy. So we have to accept that the wisdom of the Election Commission in fixing the schedule is fair and reasonable.
Fair point, but you're saying that in future you would like to see a 5-phase election even in some of these important states and difficult states, complex states that you spoke of. But since you brought up the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, sir, let me address that issue because, in Jammu and Kashmir,
all the additional arrangements are in place.
Absolutely. I understand that. But since you raised the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, sir, let me bring up that issue with you, because whether it is Omar Abdullah of the National Conference or Mehbooba Mufti, they believe that by not holding simultaneous elections, assembly along with the Lok Sabha elections, that this is a sinister design. I'm quoting Mehbooba Mufti, it's sinister design of the government. But it's not unusual, sir, that in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, we haven't actually had simultaneous polls.
Yes. We have had as well as we have not had. So it depends upon the local ground realities of the state. I have no idea what the Election Commission found to delink the state elections from the central elections. There must be some valid reasons. Only thing is, unless you find out what are those reasons, because I'm told, at least on the TV, it is only a security consideration. But security consideration, in what manner is it going to affect? I have no idea. Unless and until we have the full details, it may not be proper to comment. But ideally, yes, it would have been better if it had been conducted simultaneously, except for the local threats or local militancy and so on. So unless I know the full details or full reasons for that decision, I'm unable to comment on that.
Fair point. Fair point. You're saying that ideally it should be held simultaneously, but of course it is a decision that the Election Commission will take. My final question to you before I let you go, Mr. Krishnamurthy. Now, a committee of Indian Statistical Institute experts has been constituted to determine the feasible threshold for counting the VVPAT slips. How would you look at this issue as we go forward, sir?
See, I am strongly of the opinion the EVMs are more credible, robust, and reliable, even without VVPAT. VVPAT is a concession given in order to accommodate the suggestions of various political parties. If we had gone through the technical report of the Government of India, Defence Ministry, as well as Mr. Indiresan Committee report, DRDO, he has clearly said the machines are absolutely credible and reliable. There is no reason to doubt the integrity of the machines.
All right, Mr. Krishnamurthy, before I let you go, sir, what would you advise the Election Commission? What would you be most concerned about as we kickstart this mammoth exercise? Sir? What would you ask the Election Commission to watch out for? This is an era of social media. Lots of restrictions have been put in place by the Election Commission. Whether political parties abide with those or not is a separate story altogether. But holistically, what are you going to be watching out for, sir, as we kickstart election 2019?
I don't want to arrogate myself to give an advice to the Election Commission. The Election Commission is quite competent to address the problems. All that I would say is it is going to be a big challenge to enforce the Model Code of Conduct, particularly because the political parties are indulging in too much of hatred, violence, and use of money power. If this can be effectively checked, I think Election Commission would have done a good job.
Too much hatred, violence and money power. Those are strong words coming in there from the former CEC, T.S. Krishnamurthy. Sir, appreciate you joining us here on the Political Exchange with your thoughts as we count down to election 2019. Let's bring our other panelists in on the conversation. Sanjay Jha of the Congress Party, Gopal Krishna Agarwal of the BJP, A. Sarvanan of the DMK, political analyst Sandeep Shastri and Alok Prasanna Kumar of Vidhi Centre for Legal Policy. Alok, you know, the opposition would like this to become a much more issue-based election as opposed to a personality-driven one. But the BJP is very, very clear. Prime Minister Modi continues to be the trump card. How do you see this playing out?
It's hard to say immediately, but I think when you use the word the opposition, I think there are about 2 or 3 different groupings there. You, of course, have the UPA with all its allies, but let's also not forget the parties which are not aligned to the UPA. We're talking about parties like YSRCP, the TRS, the Biju Janata Dal, and also the Trinamool Congress. While they may share some sympathies with the UPA, these are parties which are sort of staking out their own claim, and in some cases they're in direct conflict with the UPA. In the context of Kerala, for instance, the Communist parties, the LDF is directly competing with the UDF, which is part of the UPA. So when we say, you know, the opposition, we have to disaggregate all these various parties, and I do think we are going to probably see a sum of local elections. We're going to see about 29 state elections plus Delhi, so that's about 30 different elections. So the ultimate result will probably just be an aggregation of these. So it may not be any one issue or any one set of issues. And I don't think we can call this a horse race in any way. I think we should avoid trying to see this as a horse race between X and Y or Y and Z, and see this as an agglomeration of 30 different elections.
Sandeep Shastri, how do you see this playing out, this regional versus national? The BJP, of course, wants to make this a national election, but the regional parties are going to try and ensure that that's not how it plays out.
Shireen, today in the Mint, I made this point very clear. 2 points. One, that this is not going to be a single election, but 29 different state elections. Every state is going to give a different verdict, and every state has its own issues. My second point, yes, there is a national narrative which the BJP is trying to develop, but let me also add this national narrative will be looked differently in every state. There is a national issue, both for the BJP and for those against it. Those against it are also focusing on issues like the economy, the promises of 2014. Yes, they are national issues, but each of these national issues will play out very differently from one state to another state. A final point, I'm a little cautious in using the word regional parties anymore because I don't think there's anything regional about these parties. I would prefer to call them state-based parties because their support base is limited to a particular state.
Okay.
Beyond a shadow of doubt, state parties are playing an important role in this election. And I think let's not ignore that there is a national narrative on both sides. It is an election which will see a competition between two national narratives. But each of these national narratives is not just going to play out in a single way, but is going to play out differently in different regions and in different states.
Sanjay Jha, what is it going to be as far as the Congress is concerned? What is your sales pitch? It was very clearly Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas for the BJP in 2014. Is the Congress going to focus on the economy? Is the Congress going to sort of switch back and forth some days between the economy and Rafael? What is it going to be?
Sharon, let me tell you, you are absolutely right. The joblessness in India today is one of epic proportions. It's a record 45-year high. The government has actually tried to suppress data, fudge data. This is a government that has destroyed the credibility of our own, government data. I think it's a damage to India's reputation. So we have many things to correct. A new government will have a tough job on hand, but we'll correct it. We are going to expose the joblessness that has happened under a very incompetent government. Remember, the GDP growth under Narendra Modi is now at a 5-year low. And the last quarter at 6.6% is miserable. It's absolutely wretched performance. Point number 2, rural distress. I mean, this government tried to suppress data on farmer suicides. But we all know how agrarian economy has suffered after demonetization, and the lousy implementation of the GST has worsened the informal economy, the small traders. We are also going to expose the very pathetic governance. Look at the state of RBI, NIA, CBI. Even the Election Commission has been threatened. We all know it. And the Supreme Court has to come and say democracy is in danger.
Gopal Agarwal, you heard the claims being made there by Sanjay Jha that it is going to be about the economy, that they will focus on GDP growth and how that has slowed down. They're going to focus on unemployment, even though this is something that the government believes is untrue. The unemployment rate is not at a 45-year high. The economy is going to be the key focus as far as shaping the narrative ahead of elections 2019 is concerned for the Congress party. How will you respond?
We are very happy that if the economic parameters are discussed, and the Congress, we know that always had been fudging data. If you go into 2014, the way Chidambaram fudged the fiscal deficit data, I can give you an example and how the fiscal deficit was not actually 4.5 but much higher than that because of so many of schemes were not even involved into the budget. Even oil bond, everything, they were just fudging the data, no performance, nothing.
Has been done by you
the result of that was because of the problem of the Congress, that we were in the fragile 5 economy globally in 2014. From there, all macroeconomic parameters, inflation, fiscal deficit, the GDP growth rate, and the ease of doing business, every parameters has seen a marked difference.
A. Saravanan, what's going to be the priority now over the next few days? Now that the dates are in, you know when you're going to the polls, what are you going to be focusing on over the next few days?
Yeah, Sharon, you hit the nail when you said that, spoke about this NSSO data. See, 15 crore new voters have come into play in the 90 crore list. So they don't know what the Congress did, that the Congress didn't. They have seen only what this BJP has done. When their future looks bleak, definitely they're not going to vote for the BJP. And BJP can speak about impressive statistics on paper, whatever they may say. But on the ground, what is there on the plate of the common man is what that counts. A small example. when we speak about farmers' distress, we had Gram Sabha meetings across the length and breadth of Tamil Nadu. The most consistent complaint, what they gave is this, that the GST on the fertilizers has gone way beyond 1,600 rupees. This 1 unit of a fertilizer, urea. This is not acceptable to them. They are worried about it. But the government has not done anything. And he speaks about direct benefit transfer. But the banks are taking away the money for not maintaining minimum balance. So where is this? This disparity is definitely going to affect them. On the ground, nothing has changed. So this will be our poll plank, and we are winning the hearts of the people. And we will sweep the elections in Tamil Nadu.
Okay. Well, that's the claim that's being made there. Alok, I'll give you the final comments before we close. What are going to be the triggers that you're going to be watching out for over the next few days?
Well, there's no particular trigger that I'll be looking out for, except to see how the narrative sort of shifts, because, I mean, even more than you or me or anyone sitting in a studio, political parties with their feet on the ground and their ears to the public opinion sort of will get a better sense of what people want to hear. And in as much as they may have a certain narrative that they want to push, if they are really interested in winning an election, they'll know that among, say, 5 issues, 2 are likely to receive, going to find more traction with certain sets of population. I'd be interested to see how the narratives
What would those two be, Alok?
No one's going to go for it. This is not going to be a one-note. What would those two be? I would think someone like one very initial thing which was mentioned by Rahul Gandhi, I think a little bit before the Pulwama attack, was a minimum income guarantee, which was a sort of a payment for everyone, for I think all the people living below the poverty line. I think if that idea has some traction, or if there is at least genuine interest, we might see some of those ideas being fleshed out. Second trigger potentially could be, whether the BJP responds to it. Even if the Congress is fleshing it out, but if the BJP feels it will find traction with only a very small section of people who are likely to vote for the Congress anyway, they will not really bother with it. But if the BJP sort of starts responding to it, starts saying, no, we have a better idea, no, actually ours is in fact more effective, or ours will provide something, then that sort of suggests that this is what is really playing on people's minds. I mean, I'm hesitant to call any issue a quote-unquote national issue. And as Mr. Sandeep Shastri said, even national issues are perceived very differently in each state. So, which is why I think parties will, at this stage, we will sort of start to see the shift in the narrative, and then maybe this is what could tell us what will happen.
All right, let me bring in Sanjay Jha. Sanjay, respond to the point that we just heard there from Alok. You talked about minimum income guarantee, and we expect that that's going to be part of your manifesto because that was the suggestion given by your party president. Is this going to be one of the big poll ideas for the Congress party?
Shirin, I don't have the liberty to tell you what we have come up with, but the Congress party is going to offer a very, very extraordinary manifesto. We have got it actually bottom up from people who are actually belonging to the sectors, talking to farmers, the small industries, everybody. And therefore, you're going to see a very full disclosure that will really set the narrative for the election. We hope to announce it, before the end of this month, so before the first round of election. And we feel that Mr. Modi's government's non-performance, the betrayal of promises to the youth on 2 crore jobs, on the farmers on the MSP and beyond, to the middle class on the way they were, they had to face extortion on excise duties on the petrol prices and diesel and LPG and kerosene that should have been much, much cheaper. They were looted actually in broad daylight. I call it the great oil robbery. The way education and health has been ignored by the government. So I think we're going to focus on the issues for the youth, for the farmers. Women's security is going to be a very, very big issue. And we believe that the narrative is going to be on the betrayal of the people of India over the last 5 years. We are very confident you're going to have a non-BJP, non-NDA Prime Minister being sworn in May 2019.
Well, those are all claims that political party spokespeople are at the liberty of making on national TV. Gopal Agarwal, I'll give you the final say in exactly 30 seconds. The big promise, 1 or 2 of the big promises that you're likely to make. Are you going to go down the minimum income guarantee route?
No, I think, Shireen, we have done enough on the economy side, and over the 219 state and central schemes over last 5 years, we have touched around 120 crore population, and particularly economically weaker sections of every segment of the society directly, and they have been benefited by one way or the other. And there is a big financial inclusion that has taken place.
Have you delivered on the promises or not? And will the promises that the Congress party and the other state parties make in election 2019, will they woo the voter? Will they draw in electoral support? Well, we'll find out soon enough. 30 days now as the election countdown has begun. But for this evening, Gopal Agarwal, Sanjay Jha, Alok Prasanna and A. Sarvanan, appreciate you joining us here on Political Exchange.
Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan is not too worried about the Indo-US trade relations despite the withdrawal of some duty benefits by the United States of America. However, in an interaction with Shireen Bhan, Brian Moynihan added that he believes that reciprocity in terms of market access is a necessary element for stronger trade ties between countries. Here's an excerpt of that exclusive conversation.
I want to get your comments on what we're seeing happen between India and the US. I mean, nowhere in comparison to what we're seeing happen with US and China. But you know, President Trump keeps bringing back the tariff issue, even in the context of India. The US has just withdrawn the GSP benefits, and India's position has been absolutely clear that, look, we're open for business, don't link the GSP benefits to what is happening with market access, and that's not a fair thing to do. What do you make of this sort of blow hot, blow cold relationship that India and the US seem to enjoy currently, especially when it comes to trade?
I think the two countries have a great relationship, and they've worked together for years, and I think I'm from a big family, and sometimes, you know, the brothers and sisters are getting a little bit of a dispute with each other. But
sibling rivalry, isn't it?
I think it's really, you got to come back to reciprocity. The words have changed over time, but reciprocity, in other words, fair access, open access, and there's a pretty good open access in India, and the current administration's even opened up more in terms of ownership of insurance companies going up higher and things. But that idea of being able to do business on equivalent terms for these large economies is important, and that is really, if you listen to the...
Is it a perception issue when it comes to India? Because as you pointed out, I mean, you know, I don't know a single sector where foreign ownership is not allowed, even to the tune of 100%, even in very sensitive areas. So is there a perception issue that India is denying market access?
I don't...
Or that the tariffs are discriminatory?
I think whenever you have tariffs, that feels protectionist. That feels like it's not open. And so I think it's, whether it's perception or reality, is at the end of the day, I think what the administration has used is the trade imbalances and the tariffs as ways to get people's attention on open access. And I think these two countries can figure this out relatively quickly. China's a little more complex because the size of the movement's higher and the different things that move. Here, I think, you know, I think if the Indian government continues to provide open access and stuff, I'm sure things will work through. These two countries have a strategic relationship among all dimensions that's very important, including the Obama administration, the prior administration coming and visiting here, and the amount of work that goes on. So I wouldn't be too worried about the relationship between these two countries, but I think the clear stand by our administration, all this is reciprocity and open access. And so when people thought it was anti-trade, it's not. It was trade on fair terms, whether it's Canada and Mexico, whether it's China, whether it will be Europe, or whether it would be here. And so I think if governments work together to have that open access, I think it'll all work through.
Since we're talking about India, let me ask you about your view on the Indian economy. I mean, it continues to be one of the world's fastest growing large economies today, especially since we've seen the slowdown in China. You've been bullish on India. Of course, currently a disproportionate amount of time and attention being spent on the outcome of the Indian elections. Is that a consideration that you're looking at?
Well, the business community doesn't like uncertainty, and no matter how it comes up, whether it's trade debates, whether it's Brexit, whether it's elections, politics, whatever it is, they want to be able, because you're investing across multiple years. So whenever I've been CEO, this is my 10th year.
Yes.
So I've gone through the two presidents of the United States, I think 3 French prime ministers, 3 British prime ministers, 2 people in this country. So you go through companies, and I'm you know, one CEO, and so companies tend to have a long duration thinking, and anything that gets in the way, that tends to make them think what's going on. And so you have an election coming up here, and people want to know that the policies will continue, and therefore they can continue to drive it. If you back up, we have this economy at Bank of America Merrill Lynch, which is best research firm in the world, has it growing at 7.2, I think, this year, and GDP in 19. That is the fastest growing larger economy, not one of the fastest growing. And I think if the country can get through the elections and the outcome says the policies of openness and reciprocity and things like that are there, I think the world thinks this economy is very interesting to them. And when you're at Davos and places like that, everybody's saying, how can I get into developing this market? And you have a tremendous entrepreneurial segment in this market. So I think all those are good things.
Let me pick up on some of the specifics that you talked about in India. What interests foreign investors today about the India story? I mean, you know, there's the whole infrastructure piece, which traditionally has been a difficult area to play out in India. There's the whole services economy. There's the manufacturing side of the story. When you talk to investors, what are they most bullish about? What are they most convinced about? And where do they intend to continue to put their money?
Well, if you think there's a couple ways to think about it. As a domestic economy, you know, 1 billion plus people, you know, spending and consuming more. There's tremendous view that can go on, and you're seeing companies invest in the retail segments and expand in retail segments. If you think about the power segment, you know, we've done solar power financing here of major installations and the ability to bring the power on, especially on a green basis, a new power basis across this country. Take the medical side. You think about the amount of medical care. The government's building more hospitals, the amount of work that goes behind it, the amount of machines that go behind it and things like that. And so all those are there. And then you think about the other way. We have 20,000 teammates that work in this country today and have worked here for us for 20 years in this country or more, that provide great services to our worldwide platform at technology development, operations and processing. So you have a tremendously, if you think about the other way, you have a tremendously talented group of people who have a tremendous ability to retool. We've been able to get, they talk about reskilling around the world, we've been able to take programming which was of one stage and move it to the more modern types of codes, programming and stuff by retraining people over 6 months in our groups, by taking them offline and retraining. That kind of enthusiasm to just learn and drive is tremendous. So you have a tremendous talent base, schools expanding and all that, with a tremendous domestic economy. Those are interesting places to be.
Well, we had reported this first in 2017, and now we understand it is likely to begin. That is, the process may begin soon, and it is going to happen in 3 phases. So in the first phase, and that is likely to be around the corner, we are going to see the entire consumer business category of Tata Chemicals being demerged into a separate entity, and this includes the likes of the salt category, the atta category, they have several other pulses, they have the snacks category as well. So that entire area is going to be demerged into a separate entity. In the second phase, we are going to see that consumer demerged business merge into Tata Global Beverages. Now, the third phase is quite interesting. Tata Coffee, which is the subsidiary of Tata Global Beverages, which essentially houses all the coffee and the pre-mixes that you see in Tata Global's gamut. What we understand is that Tata Coffee is going to be merged into Tata Global Beverages in the final phase. So, phase 3 and phase 2 may see a little bit of an overlap, but net we're going to see one consolidated entity where Tata Global Beverages houses the entire consumption facing themes of the Tata Group. Now, the entire process is not going to be very quick. It will happen in a phased manner, as I said. So 12 to 18 months is the timeline that I'm picking up, is estimated to be the conservative time, similar to the defense business, for instance, that it should take for the entire process to go through. We also, in fact, understand that Tata Group has already started looking for possible management executives to handle the overseeing of the synergy. So they're trying to firm up the management structure at this point in time. The heart of the strategy is very clear. N. Chandra has been talking about how it makes sense to maximize the synergies and profitability of various group companies. So they are looking at essentially building synergies, consolidating operations and bringing down the kind of subsidiaries, the various subsidiaries that all these various companies have. We did, of course, reach out to Tata Group, but they said that they did not want to comment on market speculation.
Thanks very much, Kritika, for joining us with that comprehensive update. Moving on, US President Donald Trump is set to release the country's budget for 2020. He's expected to demand additional $8.6 billion in funding to build the wall along US-Mexico border. CNBC's Elon Mui joins us with more details. Elon, what else will President Trump ask for in this budget?
Well, the president will be seeking some big increases in defense spending and coupling that with big decreases across the rest of the federal government. The White House is planning to ask for $750 billion in defense spending for next fiscal year. A lot of that increase is going to be coming in an off-budget, very controversial account. And they're also going to be asking for $8.6 billion in funding for the border wall. The administration says that will allow it to build 722 miles of border along the U.S.-Mexico border toward the south. Meanwhile, the White House is also eyeing some other large cuts elsewhere, $2.7 trillion over the next decade. That's going to come from cuts to discretionary spending, as well as some changes to the rules in mandatory spending programs that will also result in cost reductions. Now, even with some of these steep declines in spending, the budget is not expected to balance until the year 2034. That is 15 years from now, and it is well outside the 10-year window that economists normally work within. Now, the White House is also going to be projecting some rosy economic figures, 3.2% growth for GDP this year, and then it'll sort of level off to about 3% for the rest of the decade. Mike, we know that the CBO is only expecting less than 2% growth in the long run. Back to you.
Thanks, Eden, for joining us with that update. Just over 18 days are left until the UK leaves the European Union, and this could be the final make-or-break week for Brexit negotiations. Theresa May's Brexit deal comes back before MPs on Tuesday for a crucial vote, but even at this late stage, talks between the UK and the EU remain deadlocked. William Marks explains more.
Several months ago, British Prime Minister Theresa May negotiated an agreement for the UK to leave the European Union. In January, a majority in the British Parliament voted against it. Since then, May and members of her cabinet have shuttled between Brussels and Westminster, trying to make tweaks to the deal so the House of Commons can finally approve it. March 29th is the current deadline for Brexit. That's less than 3 weeks away. So how can May get from here to there? Well, by March 12th, she must offer Parliament another up or down vote on her divorce agreement with or without revisions. If lawmakers approve it, she could still try to make Brexit happen by March 29th. But it's possible she might need more time to rush through all the necessary legislation, in which case she could ask for a brief extension to the deadline with an uncertain end date. If her deal loses that first vote, May's promised a second separate vote on March 13th. That could allow Parliament to decide whether it wants the UK to exit the EU with a deal, just not May's deal, or with no deal. Now, if no deal wins a majority, then without any comprehensive arrangements over trade, customs, or citizens' rights, Britain would still leave the EU on March 29th. But if enough lawmakers dislike that option, May is guaranteed a third vote on March 14th to consider a possible extension. If that idea wins parliamentary support, the UK would ask Europe for more time to consider its options. Theresa May wants to limit any extension to 3 months, but it's not clear whether the EU will suggest more time than that, demand less time than that, or offer no time at all. If that third vote fails on March 14th, the UK could be back to square one. The challenge here is that the Parliament behind me, guys, is just so divided. There are so many different fragmented constituencies, all of them pushing different options I tried to outline there. The real challenge for Theresa May is finding a way through those various constituencies successfully in order to pass her deal. But all indications so far are that she's going to face the same problems she faced about a month ago, and there is an overwhelming majority of MPs who will vote down her deal. The real question then is, which route will she herself try to push for, and could we end up with a postponement to Brexit and all the implications that will have for businesses that have been so nervous about this potential cliff edge at the end of this month?
Thanks, Willem, for joining us with that latest update. Want to take the bus or the metro in your city? Open your Uber app. That's the idea cab aggregator Uber is working towards after the success of this option in Denver. CNBC-TV18's Jude Sanith reports now.
A month ago, the people in Denver, Colorado woke up to see a transit option on their Uber app. This option let them pay for their bus rides through Uber's ticketing partner, Masabi. The exercise proved successful, and Uber is now talking to other ticketing platforms to replicate this concept around the world.
So we're sort of building a platform so that we could work with different cities that use different technologies to fulfill their ticketing.
Right.
So, over time, we want to be able to offer the ability to not just plan your transit journey, but to act on it. And so you have that seamless experience in the Uber app, where you now know how to get to where you're going using public transportation, and then you can purchase that ticket, get on the bus and train, and go.
This means a bus ride or a metro ride could also add to its existing options like auto rickshaws, e-scooters and e-bikes. The transit foray comes at a time when the aggregator is considering launching its jump scooters in India. But for now, Uber will look to leverage its existing partnership with the Delhi Metro, where it offers last-mile services to and from metro stations. But challenges are aplenty.
One of the interesting challenges is working with both the formal transportation networks and the informal transportation networks. And that's a challenge that we're really excited to work through, with our team on the ground in India.
Uber says the other challenge it is working on resolving is allowing multiple modes of transit like scooters, autos, cabs, buses, and the metro for the same trip. It hopes this will be resolved by the time it launches Uber Transit in India. In Santa Monica, Jude Sanith.
With that, it's time to wrap this edition of India Business Hour Plus. But before we go, here is some news on what can probably be labelled the biggest pop culture hit in recent times, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Disney has won big this weekend as their latest offering, Captain Marvel. The movie has dominated the box office, raking in more than $115 million. The superhero movie scored the biggest world opening of all and sets up The Last Avengers, which releases next month. So go and catch this one. Good night.